We come back from the weekend for Locked On NHL in Utah. What in the world is going on with Utah HC's former identity in the Arizona Coyotes? Plus, we're going to get a little bit into some restricted free agent talk. A lot of you guys have asked me about it. Plus, we get our predictions for Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final.
You are Locked On NHL in Utah, your daily podcast on all things hockey in Utah, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Locked On NHL in Utah, your number one daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club. I am your host, Robyn Leonio, alongside Tom Callahan. We want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcast. It is officially draft week, guys. Hope you guys are excited. Maybe you're making the trip down to Vegas. Maybe you are staying in Salt Lake. Maybe if you're an Arizona fan, you're staying in Arizona. Whatever it might be, hey, we got a lot of content for you guys coming up, from draft talk, free agent talk, all things Utah Hockey Club. And Tom, we're going to start off by talking about Utah's former identity in the Arizona Coyotes. And it's because it's relevant because there is still some, not only is what was once the Coyotes is now Utah, but also do we still have a decent amount of Arizona fans lingering around here to try and maybe seeing if we might give any updates or two on what we know of the situation. And let's just say this is really something else.
So let's give everybody the TLDR if you need to be caught up. When the assets of the franchise were transferred, it was the hockey ops, it was the contracts, it was all that. But what it was not was the creative. So the name, the word mark, the logo, the record book, in fact, still stays with the Arizona Coyotes. So that is still owned by Alex Meruelo. And he also still owns the Tucson Roadrunners. So pursuant to that, the team is dormant. There is a 5-year window for Meruelo to try to come back to the NHL with an arena in hand. He, in that 5-year window, cannot sell a majority stake of the team. He can sell up to 20% to generate some revenue in case he needs for funding, but that's it. So he cannot sell more than 20%, and it's a 5-year exclusive window for him. Okay, so now that said, what was hinging on here, and one of the reasons why the NHL wanted to move. They were getting nervous about the idea that all of this was going to hinge on this land auction, and we didn't really know what was going to happen, and were the Coyotes even going to get it if they got into the land auction. So turns out that the NHL, they make the decision to do what they did. Mm-hmm. Well, let's fast forward to this past week, June 13th, actually. So now we're talking, 10 days ago as of this taping. The Arizona State Land Department scheduled the land auction for June 27th, but canceled it. And the reason they canceled it, so there is a letter from the Arizona State Land Department that you can find online. This copy is through msn.com that I got. And it talks about, after much consideration, the Arizona State Land Department determined it is in the best interest of the trust to cancel the auction and reorder the steps. Now, this is the important part, Robyn. ASLD recently confirmed that the proposed arena use will require a special permit. So that's the important part. Recently confirmed, meaning they kind of knew about this before, that the proposed arena use will require a special permit. And as a result, we, meaning the Arizona State Land Department, are requesting that the applicant, the Coyotes, file for and receive a special use permit prior to the auction. So it says this affords the applicant and ASLD certainty that the applicant can build what it intends to build for its anchor tenant. It's not uncommon for ASLD to require applications to secure zoning/use permits prior to the auction. Blah, blah, blah. We know it's a disappointment to the Coyotes. Okay. Coyotes issue a statement saying, today, after over a year of planning and meeting every obligation required under Arizona law, the Arizona State Land Department unilaterally canceled the auction that was scheduled to occur June 27th. The Coyotes, obviously, are peeved about this, It says the unprecedented action by the state of Arizona seriously jeopardizes the future of NHL hockey returning to the desert under this ownership group. That's not in the statement, but that's what, reading between the lines, what it means. As was announced in April, press conference by Alex Mariuello and Commissioner Gary Bettman, blah, 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 the site. So as we go through this, the state of Arizona made it clear to the Coyotes, and the Coyotes said, we're fully committed to building out the infrastructure, going through the necessary approvals and development. And yet they're mad they canceled the auction despite the objections of the Coyotes less than a week before the scheduled auction date. Next part of the statement, the organization, Coyotes, has worked in good faith with the ASLD and has been on track to win the auction next week until the sudden reversal by ASLD today. By canceling the land auction, the state is foregoing millions, here comes the guilt trip, and potentially billions of dollars that would have gone directly to K-12 education. By investing in the infrastructure of the site, Coyotes would have unlocked over 2,000 acres of state land for the development that would have returned over $2 billion to Arizona schools. And so it kind of goes on for that. The Coyotes are exploring all their legal options given this short-sighted decision by the state. Well, here, Robyn, I'll throw this to you now that we've put all that out there. And I can see your face now that I'm back to the camera, and I came back to a very interesting face. So here's what happened. In the short, here's what I'm reading. Okay, this is Tom's interpretation and only my interpretation. Arizona, the state of Arizona said, you guys are going to need a permit. We're going to confirm that for you, but we're pretty sure you're going to need a permit. Coyotes, no problem. Whatever you need, we'll get it. No problem. State of Arizona, you probably need that first. Coyotes, no problem. We'll get you whatever you need. And state of Arizona still don't have the permit, huh? Maybe we should postpone this land auction. And that, to me, that's what happened. And I feel like the Coyotes were just kind of, I think they were a little cocksure about this. They just felt like they were going to have it in their hand. Well, we're going to do everything necessary. Well, have you done it yet? No.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do it.
What's interesting was there was multiple miscommunication, at least given to media, of what was exactly needed. There was one thing. Oh yeah, no, a plan, like a whole actual use plan, like plan of use, shouldn't necessarily be needed until after the auction was complete. And I think that's what confused a lot of people. It's like, oh yeah, they didn't need to really know anything until after it was all done. But in fact, I feel like, and again, this is a huge thing that the state land department can decide what to do, what they want, and in this case, it's quote that we order the steps, ask they need the permit first, because we're talking a massive, over 110 acre piece of land that is going to have so many different things, from including the arena, housing, shopping, a bunch of other things. It's not. It is not completely out of out of the ballpark to ask for, make sure that they get a special permit first.
If I wanted to buy a piece of land and put a 4-story dwelling on it, let's just say I wanted to buy like some land out in the woods somewhere in I don't know, Western Canada, the first thing I would do is check to see, if I buy this parcel of land, can I put something that's 4 stories high on it? So what do I need to do? I need to show them the blueprints and my plans for what I want to do. Then if I need permits or exceptions, they're like, you know what? No one's done it. It's not allowed, but we're going to let you do it if you jump through these hoops. Okay.
Plus,
that's what I would do.
It is also not only taking a look at that, it was also taking a look at the city's general plan. To take a look at that piece of parcel, and it's like, all right, what is this parcel? What is this use of the current parcel in the general plan for the city? And you have to read it in the very specifics, because if there's any bit of vagueness to it, you have to go out and confirm it with the city yourself.
It sounds to me, also, just as I'm thinking about this, something might have transpired that made the state of Arizona less certain about this whole process, to the point where they're now saying, tell you guys what, we're still open to the idea, but you need to go get the permits first. And we're telling you, you need a permit and you can get a permit. We're telling you, you can get it. They didn't say, no, you can't get the permit, but they reordered the steps so that now they have to go ahead and get the permitting done first.
Now,
I wouldn't see a problem with that if everything else was on track.
This is the concern that I will give to a lot of Coyotes fans out there. However, this significantly delays what the hope was. There was that like as you mentioned, there is that 5-year window that Alex Morello has to reactivate the Arizona Coyotes. However, as per contract with Gary Bettman, that Alex Morello needs to show that they are over 50% done within 3.5 years. If that is not complete, then the remaining year and a half is tossed away. He loses it completely.
Now, here's the one bonus. The one bonus to this being Phoenix, Arizona is a 12-month construction season. But I don't want to see a rush job arena either.
Oh.
I don't know how good I'd feel about going into a building that went up in, 8 months. Because you don't want people cutting corners and cheaping out on things and just saying, yeah, no, that roof is good. I don't want that. But yes, 12-month construction cycle in Arizona means there is the possibility of getting a building done in maybe 2 years, 2.5 years. But that's with everything lined up, all the ducks in a row.
Yep.
Everything is good.
And that's the thing. I think even speaking so, a lot of people were saying if the Coyotes would even have won the auction, if it continued to have been this week, it would have been okay, yeah, but they wouldn't be able to actually break ground for several more months. Now this delays it even more. So I think that's what the concern is, and I think that's what's going on. A lot of people were frustrated, and I think a lot of people were asking this, Tom, for at this point because of just another thing you can add on your Arizona Coyotes arena saga bingo. That just Alex Morello just cut your losses and walk away.
I think they'll be back someday because Gary Bettman wants them back someday.
Yeah.
I just don't think this is the ownership group.
It is not the ownership group. It will be somebody else. And who knows when it will come back. And again, like you said, it will be back. It's just could happen later. And again, because it all hinges on what Morello decides to do, which is, I feel so bad for Arizona fans. I feel that this is happening.
Yes, I agree. I agree completely. In the meantime, go support the D1 team at Arizona State.
Sure.
I know you're an Arizona grad. I used to work for Arizona hockey. I mean, I get it, but support the program that is there.
That's fair.
If you're in Phoenix and you want to go watch some ice hockey, go watch men's D1 hockey. It's good. Or women's. They actually have like 6 teams. They have ACHA. Anyway, I digress.
They do. Anyways, that's going to be enough. We're going to talk on this topic. What we're going to do is we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to talk about some restricted free agents. And then in a little bit, we are going to get into some Stanley Cup final talk because we got that coming up. Game 7 going to be tonight when everyone is listening to this. Can't believe we made it to a Game 7. We'll get to that right after this. And today's episode is brought to you by Policy Genius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family quick and easy. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Your work-life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. With thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found their best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. Once again, that is policygenius.com. Let's keep things rolling on this episode of Locked On NHL in Utah. Let's get back north to the northwestern state of these four corners to talking about Utah. It's a big week for transactions for all around the NHL, Tom. We've got the draft coming up, the restricted free agent, the negotiation period for pending free agents should be opening up, I think, relatively soon, because it usually happens right before UFA period opens on July 1st. But there's a lot of things we can get to. Restricted free agents, I think, as of right now, is the biggest thing we can talk about, because Utah has a decent amount of them coming into this period.
They do, and later on, I'm going to complain about Stanley Cup Final Game 7 being so close to the draft, being so close to free agency. We'll get into that. But before we do that, we got to talk about some RFAs. I do want to look at the defense, because there are three pretty important players who are RFAs, 2 UFAs. We're not going to talk about Josh Brown or Travis Dermott. I do want to talk about Sean Durzi, JJ Moser, and Yusuf Valimaki. I have seen some speculation online from different sources where people saying they're only going to re-sign one of these guys, they're only going to re-sign 2. Look, they're not expensive, but they are needed. And in fact, I would argue Durzi was probably one of the best acquisitions coming over from the Kings. And that trade to get him, I think, was huge. So he's my number one target coming back. And so listen to how his contract broke out. It was a 2-year deal, ended this year, obviously, 1.7 AAV, 1.4 base in 22-23, 2 million base in 23-24. The total salary went from 1.4 to 2 million. So what are you looking at for Durzi? You're looking at a raise, and depending too. Now, remember, here's the other thing, Robin. I think it's important to point out, just because someone's an RFA doesn't mean your only option is to qualify them or not, or go to arbitration. Those are options. You can let somebody walk away if you want by not qualifying a restricted free agent, or you can, one side or the other can go to ARB, but you can also sign them to a longer deal.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that a little bit. So honestly, with Durzi, my probably, I guess, my most important thing with him is getting him in at a reasonable term and a reasonable dollar value. But I think at 25, when we talk about defensemen blossoming a lot later, he's on the upside. So if you sign the right contract for him right now, if you give him 5 or 6 years, that's going to take him to 30, 31. Maybe you give him and teams with control can give up to 8.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get him at the right value right now, if you give him a pretty decent raise, maybe he goes up to 4.5 AAV, and then the money escalates. Number one, over time, the cap grows, so it's not nearly as painful. But number two, by the time he's 28 at a 4.5 AAV, I think he is a tremendous value proposition for this team. So he is probably the most important guy for me out there.
He very much is, and I feel like you're right. Not a lot of people talk about that option being out there, is actually straight up offering them a actual deal rather than just a qualifying offer. The qualifying offer, I want to say this though, Tom, I feel like it's important to say that I feel like a lot of teams do this, in which they submit the qualifying offer because they're not ready to issue a full deal yet. So it's like, we're going to issue this. We're issuing this deal just to hold on to your rights, so we don't lose you when this when the free agency period opens.
Which is not the worst thing to do. I mean, if you think you want a guy here and you need more time, yes, by all means, qualify.
Yeah, and then of course there is at that point though, there is the risk of offer sheets, where a player can get, a restricted free agent can get an offer sheet and decide to want to sign up that said, the original team has the option to match it. But the issue about that, cool, it's good. They're able to match it. They're able to keep it. But the issue about that is maybe, just maybe, this original team ends up having to pay more than they originally thought.
Yes. And so I can tell you a story where that happened, and it was Shea Weber in Nashville. So before Weber ended up, and everything came apart a year later anyway, but for the Predators, for whatever reason, the financial demand in the front office or on the front office and general manager David Poyle was that the money wasn't there the way it probably should have been at the time. Now, remember, this is when people were overpaying for goaltenders, but they could have got Pekka Rinne, Ryan Suter, and Shea Weber all in at $7 million a year. So at $7 million, and then at that time 7 years, they would have been fine. But then Philly comes in off the top rope, throws this insane offer sheet at Shea Weber. And honestly, Weber, if Weber had waited one more year, he could have just gone anywhere. But I don't know if his agent steered him wrong or what, but he got offer sheeted by Philly. Of course, Nashville had to match it, but the money was so insane, they end up losing Ryan Suter because they couldn't pay both at that point. Now you're hamstrung by it. So Suter ends up leaving to go to Minnesota. A lot of things, a lot of dominoes fall from there. But Nashville ended up paying more for Shea Weber at the time than they really wanted to, or maybe even had to, because of Philadelphia jumping in and the player getting a little antsy. So yes, it can work that way, and that is a cautionary tale. The other thing, too, that you have to be aware of, the other guy that I'd like to bring up as a warning is PK Subban. Montreal did not want to lay out money for PK Subban, and to his credit, Subban said, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself. So what did he do? He signed a 2-year bridge deal, and in that 2-year bridge deal, won a Norris Trophy. So guess what? His next contract was that monster, what was it, $9.5 million a year albatross, as it turned out by the end of it. But Montreal was forced into signing it because he went out, won the Norris Trophy, and now all of a sudden it's like, well, you're either going to keep this guy for big money or you're losing him for nothing. And so you have to be very cautious as a general manager.
Absolutely have to. And I think a lot of people can be optimistic that Bill Armstrong can make the right decision regarding these RFAs. There were a couple in the last couple of years that have gone to arbitration, said, hey, we don't like this offer that you're giving us on this qualifying offer or whatever it might be. We're going to go to arbitration. Lawson Krause comes to mind. They ended up making it, but they ended up making it right before they actually right. Had the actual arbitration. It was even in the arbitration room. That's how late these things can happen. It can go up all the way into the last minute. It's a whole negotiation thing. So there are a lot of different factors that go into signing an RFA specifically. And again, we were talking about the other ones, all the other ones that are in here too. But in these defensemen, all of them are arbitration eligible.
Right. And so that's where it's going to get interesting for me with JJ Moser and Juuso Valimaki, because you look at, and that's the other thing, you always bring the comps into it and what is everybody else making. These guys could end up, even though they're budget players right now, if you go to arbitration, all of a sudden you start comparing numbers, their cost goes up alarmingly. Now, as a club, you may be forced into either signing a player for money you're not comfortable with or walking away from the award deal.
Which is certainly why you have to be very cautious about what you're going to do with these players. Now, what you mentioned earlier, signing Jersey to a, actually focusing on actually signing them to a contract rather than giving them a qualifying offer is probably going to be not in the team's best interest, but also do something that's going to help him out as well. Because obviously that's what, they're not going to just do something that's just completely team friendly. They want something for them. Right. Sure. They want something they want security. I think that's what a lot of these players want. They want security for a few extra years to know what their value is. The case of Moser and Valimaki, they're kind of players, to be honest, that are kind of flying a little bit lower on the radar. Moser was just an overager from the draft, and Valimaki was picked up off the waiver wires from from the Flames. And I'm not saying that they're at risk. They're not at risk of being offer sheeted, but you give them a qualifying offer, just buy yourself some extra time. I don't see that. I don't think there will be any issues with them.
Yeah, and again, here's the thing to keep in mind. So Moser's 24, and Valimaki is 25. So they're still relatively young when it comes to defensemen. And again, we talk about defensemen and their game evolving later on. But the Coyotes as a team are growing together right now. And from everything we've seen, Robyn, I'd say 90% of this core pretty much gets along, likes each other, enjoys coming to the rink every day with one another. There's something to be said for that. That's important. That's building your culture. So if these guys fit in, they don't rock the boat. And look, cap space is not going to be the issue for Utah. And we talk about that all the time. But it's what are the purse strings now? And that changes with the new ownership group. So that's one thing we don't have an answer to, but probably will, I'd say, in the next 10 days. Once we get into probably day 3 of free agency, if Utah has made a splash or not, we will know. But the other thing, too, is once you get past, I'd say, really the end of day 2, you don't overpay players as much anymore. So, and that's when you start to find your bargain signings and what have you. But if Utah does decide to make a splash and they spend out a little, they certainly have the room to do so. And then to know that ownership gave them the green light to do it, that's kind of a different perspective now. And I think Utah fans might feel even just a little better about that.
Yep. And again, a lot of that goes with how they handle this RFA negotiation period. Because, I'm not worried that they're going to spend too much money on all 4 of the RFAs, right? I'm not worried that they're going to do that. I think Bill Armstrong has not been, he doesn't bend that way. he's pretty careful with how he spends the team's money. And again, it's very different now that there is a new ownership group, but I think we're still going to see a bit of the same. I think that's kind of what we're going to see. I think in the ideal world, all these players are back at a very, very, very friendly contracts. And again, as you mentioned they love playing for Utah. They loved playing for the Coyotes, and no reason to say that they won't love playing for Utah. It's the same team, just different city.
I think it's going to be really down to the players too. And of course, both Moser and Valimaki are not from North America either. So that, kind of plays into it a little bit. I mean, quite honestly, Utah might feel a little bit more like home for these guys. So that might be something else that might work in the club's favor as far as re-signing them. But if you say to these 3 players, you're going to be a core that we're going to build around, we're probably going to pick up 1 guy, maybe 2 in free agency here. You could always make a deal. You never know what comes out of the draft. And plus, when you're picking a defenseman, I'm going to go ahead and say this. Let me temper your expectations, Utah fans. Do not expect, especially if they pick a defenseman, maybe a forward, but I think they're going to go D at number 6.
Oh, yeah.
When they pick that D at number 6, don't expect that player to jump in this year or next year. D take longer, and that's okay. It's okay, but you don't want to rush those players because then you ruin their confidence, you ruin their game. Just whoever you're picking at number 6 is probably not there this year. So just know that's how you're going to build trades, free agency, and keeping what you have right now.
Plus, let's also remember that we're talking about a team that is still not quite Stanley Cup ready. They might continue to kind of be on that bubble in the next couple years, but they're not ready. They're not ready to be that team yet, and that's why rush your prospects. Let them cook. Bill Armstrong and assistant general manager for the last couple of years, John Ferguson, have been pretty good at saying, hey, we'll let these kids even overcook a little bit, like over-season them a little bit in the minors and the juniors until we know for darn sure they are ready for the NHL.
Yep, and that's not a bad way to go about it.
All right, we're going to wrap up our thoughts on this episode. We're going to talk about the Stanley Cup Final going into Game 7. Who would have thought? We're going to talk about that right after this. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Summertime means baseball, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 that you can use on anything from who's going to hit it out of the park to who's going to maybe even win the World Series this year. We're maybe looking months in advance, but hey, why not? Because you can visit FanDuel.com and bet on all those things. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Let's wrap up this episode of Locked On NHL in Utah. We are going to talk a little bit of Stanley Cup Finals because, oh my God, Tom, Game 7 is upon
historic
us.
Game 7.
I did not expect this.
Well, no one did. Absolutely no one did. First of all, no one expected Florida up 3-0. And then no one expected Edmonton to win the next 3. So, and now with a lot of travel back and forth, it's really interesting to me the way the series has swung. Man, Florida had a chance to put them away, complete the sweep. And honestly, the way Edmonton reacted after Game 3, I was torn between they're resigned to their fate and, man, are they just really depressed about how poorly they played and not come up with the results. And actually, they didn't even play that poorly, but just how defeated, you feel when you're doing what you can and you're not getting the results. But then that 8-1 game, and here's the other thing, the 8-1 win, that's easy to just check it off as an anomaly in the series. And Edmonton, okay, they found their scoring for one game, but then Florida came back and beat them in 5, and everybody would have went, all right, yeah, that happens. No, that's not what happened. And now Edmonton has a chance to do something in the Stanley Cup Final that only the 42 Leafs have done, and that's come back from a 3-0 series deficit to win the Cup. So right now, here's the thing. I picked Florida. I have to stick with my pick. I cannot abandon the Panthers now. I picked them. But had I not picked Florida to win this Stanley Cup from the beginning, they were the team I had in my bracket lifting the cup. I would be sorely tempted to back Edmonton right now because, man, they've looked so good.
It is certainly something. And you know what? It's interesting because pre-Stanley Cup Final, I made my prediction that Edmonton always would win. And then when they went down 3-0, I lost all hope. I was like, there's nothing to it. Now there's a unique opportunity, Tom, that from what we all know, as you said, the last time it happened in the Cup Final was 1942. But the last time it happened in the Stanley Cup playoffs in general, it involved my own hometown team. Not only am I going to just erase that. I mean, can't get erased, but at least that the San Jose Sharks would no longer be the last team it happened to. So I just see that's the very reason why. One of the main reasons I kind of want to see Edmonton win it, just so I can almost forget about it.
I kind of wish we'd have looked on FanDuel to see what the odds would have been after Game 3.
That would have been nice.
I kind of wish we would have looked. But, if you're a hopeful Edmonton fan, maybe you threw down a 10 spot or a 20 spot and said, we'll see what happens. But, wow, here we are. So here's my thoughts just real quick is if Florida's going to win, it's going to be 5-on-5. Edmonton's special teams has been, for the most part, dominant. Florida's power play has not been there. Edmonton's power play has been ridiculous, although less so in the Cup Final. I just can't see Florida winning if they don't beat them 5-on-5. And so that's what they have to do. And they need to find a way to figure that out. And Florida looks like a tired team. Edmonton looks like a slightly less tired team. And I know we're going to find out about who's really injured and what's wrong with everybody at the end of the series and everything like that. But here's the other thing. The other thing that has to happen now, and it hasn't happened for 3 games, is that Bob has to outplay Stuart Skinner. Skinner has looked incredibly good as the series has gotten into that games 4, 5, and 6 window. So that's it. Those are my keys. Everything hinges on those.
It certainly does. One thing I want to bring up, you gave me a good idea when you said we wanted to see what the FanDuel looked like back then. But why don't we take a look at what the FanDuel odds are for tonight? I have them on. I have them on right now. As of right now, the Oilers are underdogs by 1.5, minus 280 if you bet on that spread. The money line it looks pretty dead even. Minus 113 for Florida, minus 106 for the Edmonton Oilers, with a total points set at 5.5.
Yeah, I was wondering what the over-under was. 5.5. I'll bet
I'm taking
over. Oh yeah, I'm gonna
definitely taking the over.
Yeah.
Now,
also, I do have a mini rant. Do we have a moment?
Yeah, I got a couple minutes.
Can we just please? It's not even going to be. It'll be 30 seconds. Can we just please stop extending the damn season so long? Can we just make it shorter? Like, we were able to play 82 games before and have the cup handed out in the middle of June, and now all of a sudden we have 6 games before the start of the final, and then I understand 2 games between, or 2 days between each game here in this series because the travel's insane. But can we bump up a little bit? Maybe compact rounds 1 and 2. Or here's a better one: not have 6 wasted games of preseason. Let's knock it down to 3. Let's shorten camp by a week. Let's jump into it earlier in October, get it underway the first full week of October, off we go, and then we play our way through. This is way too long. We should not be handing out the Stanley Cup almost at July 1st. What's going to happen next? We're holding the draft at a game 7? Ridiculous. Also, it's ridiculous that game 7 wasn't played on a weekend. Poor planning.
I know, right? Like, of Mondays of all days.
It works for the national championship in college basketball and college football, I guess. So you could make the argument that what else are you doing on a Monday night? People come home from work. Maybe they're tired. They want to sit in front of the TV and watch a game and just have a Monday about it. But I don't know. That's me.
You know, one thing I will add, though, it might add to the chaos of it all, but I mentioned it on, maybe it was the previous episode or was the one right before. Just imagine the words of the best thing that could potentially happen of any hockey fan to watch. Game 7, Stanley Cup Final, sudden death, overtime.
That would be fun. That would be a lot of fun. We'll see what happens. I mean, either way, like I say, I'm still going to stick with the Panthers, but man, if that game goes to overtime, wow.
I want to add one more thing. I joked about this with friends. I might as well say it on the podcast too. It's really funny. I have a group of friends of mine. They are now a married couple. They got married this last fall. He is a Vegas Golden Knights fan, celebrating Vegas's last Stanley Cup championship.
Okay.
She is an Edmonton Oilers fan. And I texted them both recently, and I'm like, by the way, I want you guys to know I hate you both.
Well, yeah, your Sharks have a long way to go.
I know. And for the Utah fans, maybe not, definitely a lot closer for the Utah rather than my own childhood Sharks. That's for sure.
Utah Hockey Club. At least we're not the Sharks. What? Nothing. Yeah, I mean, no, yes,
you're right.
Hey, no, seriously though, like Utah fans have a lot of reason to hope. But in the meantime, this is going to be an awful lot of fun to watch the two clashing styles in a game 7. I can't wait.
Oh, I cannot wait either. But that's going to be it for this episode of Locked On NHL in Utah. Before I do that, wait, one more thing. I didn't even ask. Score prediction.
Oh, 5-4 Panthers.
5-4 Panthers.
Told you I was taking the over.
All right, taking the over. I'm going to go 4-3 Oilers in overtime.
Okay.
Just why not? Chaos. All right. Anyways, once again, thanks everyone for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, and subscribe if you have yet to already. Available everywhere you get your podcast, including on YouTube, SiriusXM, ad-free on Amazon Music. Interact with us on social media as well. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnNHL in Utah. and on the app formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, at LO_NHL Utah. I am personally at Robyn_Leonio. Tom Callahan is at Callahan on air. Interact with us, ask a question you might have. We might interact right back or on a future episode of the Locked On NHL in Utah podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you guys next time.